Hello and welcome. My name is Chris, and in this video, we're going to discuss how and where to spend your time to bring in new loans to the bank. Some of these methods may seem easier, or at least less awkward than others, but we're going to put some structure around the merits of each. In short, this video will help you decide how you should spend your time bringing in new business loans to the bank. First, let's set the table a bit. While managing your existing portfolio is incredibly important, we're going to focus predominantly on bringing new relationships to the bank. We're also limiting the conversation to new loan relationships while acknowledging that loans are only a portion of what we do as bankers. With that out of the way, let's talk about some of the ways we might source new loan relationships. If you have an existing portfolio, having your customers ask for a new loan is awesome, but probably doesn't require a video unto itself. Some of the ways we could generate new business include cold calling, whether via phone calls or email prospecting, networking through lead share groups like BNI, Chambers of Commerce, or other organizations, and finally, and perhaps the best source of new opportunities, is COI, or Centers of Influence, referrals. Within this category, it's worth distinguishing between transactional COIs, like commercial real estate or business brokers, and non-transactional COIs, like CPAs, financial advisors, and attorneys. And we can't forget, if you do have an existing portfolio, one of the best ways to meet new prospects is by asking for referrals from your existing customers. Okay. We're going to assume you're familiar with the various loan stages 1 through 6, which represent deal identified all the way through loan closed. Don't worry if you're unfamiliar with those stages, you'll learn about them as we go through the video. So let's start with the hypothetical loan goal of $5 million, shown here as stage 6 closed business. Now we're going to visualize a sales funnel, making assumptions about the percentage chance of a deal advancing from one stage to the next, and work backwards to figure out how many loan dollars we need to get into stage 1 to reach our stage 6 goal of $5 million in loans closed. Stage 5 represents approved loans, and while we'd love for all our approved loans to close, sometimes our competition steals deals away from us, we might lose a deal during due diligence, or the applicant may just decide to back out. So we'll assume an advance rate of 80% of our approved deals actually close, meaning we need to get about $6.25 million in loans approved to meet our annual goal. While we'd like to have all of our deals get approved, history suggests that our approval rate will be closer to 60% for new to the bank loan applicants. Now, some of you may already be questioning these advance rates. If you're in this camp, that's great. In fact, this example is a generic sales funnel. We'll be doing 2 more in just a moment that assume a specific or different deal source, so just play along with the example for now if you would. Getting back to the math, if we assume 60% of our deals submitted to underwriting get approved and 80% of our approved deals get closed, we need to submit a little over $10 million in loans to underwriting to close $5 million. Now, stage 3 is where the magic happens in the loan submission process. As the RM, you're running your ability to pay, writing your credit memo, and overall telling the story for the underwriter. However, there should be no magic in the number of deals that advance to stage 4, since to reach stage 3, we must have a full package including an application, so we'll say that 100% of the deals that reach stage 3 will advance to stage 4. If you're keeping score at home, we're still at a little over $10 million in pipeline while in stage 3. Stage 2 has a lot of variability in the advance rate, but if you're here, that means you've collected some level of financials, maybe a tax return or 2 for discussion purposes, but not anything that could be considered an actual application for a loan. We're going to assume a 40% advance rate at this stage for discussion purposes, but remember, we'll be re-examining advance rates later. Stage 1 means you've identified an opportunity with a prospect who wants to talk with you about a loan, but you haven't collected anything yet on paper. Usually, to qualify as an identified opportunity, A scheduled call should have taken place as opposed to a passing conversation at a networking event. But in any event, we're going to assume 20% of those meetings where a loan is discussed in some capacity get advanced to stage 2 or beyond. And now let's look at the top number, $130 million, to close $5 million in loans. To a lot of people, myself included, that's going to be a disturbingly large number. And before we talk about how we might make that top number more manageable, let's paint an even bleaker picture. Now for this sales funnel, we're going to assume that the only place we source deals is through something near and dear to my heart, email prospecting. We'll go quicker this time now that we're familiar with the mechanics of the sales funnel and the math involved. We'll use the same $5 million goal for stage 6, but this time let's assume that only 60% of the deals that we get approved close, because we're likely going to find ourselves in more competitive situations. Let's also assume that only 30% of the deals we submit get approved, because while we proactively made contact with the prospect, neither we nor a COI or other referral source pre-qualified them for us. In this example, at this stage, we're already needing $28 million in deals submitted to underwriting in order to close $5 million in loans. Of course, any application we take will be submitted, so stage 3 advances to stage 4 will still be 100%. And for purposes of this discussion, let's also keep stage 2 and stage 1 advance rates at 40 and 20% respectively. Now, if we take a step back and look at what the math tells us, we need to have an appointment with and talk about a loan for almost $350 million to close $5 million in loans. This definitely looks like the opposite of work smarter, not harder, and that's being very polite. Hashtag no thanks. Taking one last look at this visualization, you will notice as a banker, you would be incredibly busy. In fact, likely working much harder than the banker in the first scenario, and quite possibly achieving a much poorer result. If you're still with me, do not despair. Let's turn the sales funnel around and assume as a banker you receive all your leads from a transactional COI who gets paid when a deal gets done. In this case, referrals from a commercial real estate broker. For the same $5 million goal, let's assume 90% of your approved deals close instead of 80%, because you only lose deals to environmental issues or appraisals and not your competition. Let's also assume that 80% of your submitted deals get approved instead of 60%, because you'll always have real estate as collateral, and we all know we love real estate as collateral. Like the other examples, 100% of stage 3 deals get submitted to underwriting, but let's assume 80% of stage 2 deals, where you start collecting financials, advance to a full package, and 90% of the folks you sit down with in person actually apply, since the broker referred you once they were shopping for properties. Now with these advance rates, you need to be referred less than $10 million in loans by a commercial real estate broker to hit your $5 million loan goal. Easy peasy, right? Not so fast. What if the commercial real estate broker specializes in deals that are not a good fit for business banking, like speculative or distressed properties, hotels, or out-of-footprint properties? The visualization here shows that if your referral source has deals that are consistent, but also consistently out of your credit policy strike zone, you're going to have a tough time getting deals approved and therefore closed. Hopefully, this visualization of the loan sales funnel has your mind already thinking about ways you may adjust how and where you spend your time when it comes to developing new business. But let's go ahead and write down some obvious takeaways. The first is that quality makes your sales process easier than quantity. It's also very important to know your strike zone before you start looking for COIs and making direct contact with prospects. We've intentionally not discussed individual deal sizes, but if you divide the dollars at each stage by your average loan size, you can guesstimate how many deals you would need to source in order to hit your goal. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, as a relationship bank, we know relationships, and by extension referrals, make the whole process easier. As you set your calendar for the week, month, and year ahead, take a look at how you're spending your time, and if you're unhappy with your results or feel like there are not enough hours in the day, consider setting yourself up for success using some of the takeaways we discussed here in this video. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you again soon.